I think the journey that we're talking about here the next few days is that journey really moving from what I would call a people-centric document management type of an approach, to an automated approach. The journey has a lot of changes associated with it. We break it down into these 7 must-haves. So once we're talking about design, we come back to that principle of saying, okay, what are those key things you need to focus on? We talk about realization because in many cases, organizations and executives, I would say, get very, very focused on installation. Why do they get focused on installation? Large projects like this have a timeline associated with them. It's kind of amazing because being an executive for a long time and other executives in here, we get very narrow focused on our annual accomplishments and annual objectives and become rather tactical on that. And installation is actually very tactical. You're thinking about an endpoint. And many times that installation is just a piece of technology being installed. But the implementation side of that is really where things get a little messier and get a little harder. And then, we talk about realization, which is getting an outcome. Can we achieve a 10 or 20% cycle reduction? Can we get more efficient at what we do? Can we move our resources to higher order work? You've seen pictures, like this. This is an illustration, kind of thinking about that implementation and how that light would actually turn on and what's behind the wall or what's behind the curtain. It's really no different what we're talking about right now within document management and files. So the seven things, and we'll go through these in a little more detail, but the first one talks to sponsorship. Getting the right executive sponsorship is critical. I would offer to you to try to get that as high of a level as you can possibly get it. Many times if you're in medical affairs or if you're in the regulatory side, getting the funding or getting the support is really hard. So think about where are those other areas that will be affected by it, especially if you can get into the commercial side, right? Where revenue is generated off of it, and how you're ultimately going to help bring a product to market and change some of the revenue generation. Because you need them to get the backing. You've got a pretty nice business model here, and they have a really nice business case to help you with the cost. So I don't think cost is the biggest problem. But when you're looking at the efficiency gains, and then you're looking at what it means to the organization, that sponsor is really necessary, especially when you're moving into the affiliate side. We do a lot of work around governance, and frankly, in many pharmaceutical companies, governance is almost a bad word. Because, we'll walk in and we'll talk to groups about doing a portfolio program with them. We'll talk with them about doing a process improvement program, about putting stewards and so forth in place to ensure that the processes stay where they need to be and keep improving. And many companies always felt that was restricting. Governance restricts me from doing what we're an entrepreneurial company. We need to be constantly pushing the envelope. But frankly, there's some balance that's also needed to be able to get the organization aligned and get things done, and then create a foundation to move it forward. Very important there. The big piece that we talk to the most is the one in red is scope creep. So understand the scope of what you're going into, stay on that path, keep that scope where you can get to so that you can actually demonstrate an outcome, and then start to think about what's the next doc type that you're going after or the next area you're going after. Early engagement, and I mean early as you possibly can in the program. Try to think through all the stakeholders that are involved in what you do. People who own at least that process, how are they involved? And then the people that are actually supplying information to that process or the receiving the information from that process, get them actively involved. The better they see the value of what you're doing, okay, the earlier you engage them in that value proposition, the less resistance you're going to get from them as you move forward. Cross-functional, but I think in these teams, as you're building the teams and understanding the team structures, understanding the skills and capabilities that you need going forward, and helping those team members to grow and mentor them as a part of the project, is where the end result of the project is they're operationalizing it as they go. And it's critical to not think again about installing something. It's really talking about how I'm going to realize the outcome and the benefits for it. Accountability is always a hard one. We do exercises almost daily with different teams, really helping them to understand their role. At times of change like this, with resistors, the accountability always comes into play. It's always a difficult one, but it's something you have to be dealing with right up front. So collaboration. Here, the collaboration is really working on, and I believe that the dependency aspects, because there are huge dependencies on the information side of this and the technology side of it and what you're talking about, but equally on the people side and the process side, right? And trying to keep those things in balance and understanding it. I think one of the nice parts that AuthorIt has brought to the table for you is the ability for most programs like this moving forward, the hardest piece is moving the legacy environment forward with them, okay? And they have a capability that allows you to take your legacy data and bring it up to day one when you start with the system, okay, so that you can start fresh going forward. So we spend a lot of time talking to companies. We use the analogy of a brown field, a field that, in the fall and things are ready to be harvested and so forth, and it's there, and it's got to go through the winter, and a green field. The really nice piece of what you're getting with an AuthorIt solution is you have that ability to go and spend your time in the green field and not have to bring 80% of your data and so forth across over a 1, 2, 3 year period of time. And get to start fresh. Not normal. I've been through many ERP implementations. That's really the hardest part. And if you can get there, it makes it a lot easier. We talk about the stakeholders, and we talk about, at the beginning of this, the sponsors themselves and keeping them involved. The biggest challenge with executive sponsors are new ideas are coming to them all the time. They're getting other management pressures that are coming at them. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them up in front of the audience so that the audience understands, yes, we're doing this, we're going to have this happen? Executive sponsors often will say, oh, wait a minute, I've got a conflict, I've got to move your meeting, I can take 15 minutes with you at the end of the day. And you're like, oh, I don't know, now that's disrupting my life. I'm like, no. If they give you the 15 minutes, you make the time for the 15 minutes, and then you help them to understand why it's so important so that they don't give you the 15 minutes at the end of the day, they give you the 15 minutes at the beginning of the day. So planning for those meetings, okay, preparation is all what it's about with communications. Think about what you're doing and how do you utilize their time as efficiently as you possibly can. And last but not least is around training. Training too often, it's not thought about from the beginning. We actually try very, very hard on all of our projects to engage the training group in the very beginning in the design phase, okay, so they're there, they can understand it. Our trainers, by the time when they're done going through the design and doing the training, we often get the comment back, wow, these people know the system better than anybody within the company. So it's not an afterthought, it really has to be baked into the beginning, especially with what you're trying to do, and especially with the breadth of using affiliates and people around the world as your points of entry. And you're going to change their world dramatically. The goal is to obviously give them higher value work. The goal was to push the lower level transactional work down or remove it, right? So helping them to understand that their life is going to be better is a critical piece to that. It seems simple. I think if you stay with a plan like that, you can make it successful. But it's hard work. Some days it's frustrating, to say the least, especially if your sponsor isn't a really strong sponsor. But you got to stay after that. You got to help your partners, and you got to help your other team members understand why they're in the game.